most of the day. So Nanda Maharaj decided, let's just remain here for the night. So Nanda Maharaj said, so, they're used to camping out. They just spent the night. The children were over there because, children like to play and they weren't disturbing the adults. The men were over here, the ladies were over there. And Nanda Maharaj had a place very near where there was a fire. So because he was the king of Braja. And all the others were his citizens. So they gave him some special place. And when he took rest, at night, a giant serpent came, a really big guy. You know the story? Big serpent, giant serpent. And from the feet of Nanda is a python. He started swallowing Nanda Maharaj. And Nanda Maharaj woke up. And Nanda Maharaj called out. What do you think he called out? Nanda Maharaj, he called out for Krishna. But wait a minute. Krishna is a little boy and he's the king. Why is the king calling for a little boy? Help. And the answer is, when the name-giving ceremony for Krishna was performed, Garga Muni, the astrologer that did the name-giving ceremony, Garga Muni, pay attention over here. You're learning a story that you haven't heard before, so you got to pay attention. Garga Muni was a Brahmana, and he was really good with astrology. So he did the chart, the astrological chart for for Krishna and Balaram, and based upon the chart, he gave them names. And he said, Garga Muni said, this son of yours, he's going to manifest powers like Narayana. He didn't say he was Narayana. He didn't say he wasn't Narayana. He said, your son is going to have powers like Narayana. You know who Narayana is, right? Lord of Vaikuntha, Lord Narayana. So Nanda Maharaj remembered that. When there's danger, sometimes when there's danger, people think of where there's their safety. And he understood, because he had all faith, he had seen it earlier in Krishna's pastimes. Krishna was really powerful. He had powers like Narayana. And he's being swallowed by this giant serpent, so he called out, Krishna! And that woke up the cowherd men. They were closer than Krishna was, because the boys were off at some distance. And the cowherd men woke up, and they took sticks and started smashing the serpent. And they took burning sticks from the fire, because there was still a fire going in their campground. And they hit the serpent with the sticks that were burning and bashing him. Didn't do anything. He continued to swallow Nanda. Uh-oh. Nanda's being swallowed by a serpent. But Krishna to the rescue. The boys were some distance away, so Krishna came quickly. As soon as he saw the serpent, he knew what to do. With his left foot, he just tapped the head of the serpent with his left foot. Not even his right foot, his left foot. And immediately, from that body of the serpent, a demigod form arose from the body of the serpent. It was from Avidyadhara, who had been cursed to become a serpent by a Brahmin from that heavenly realm. It's not actually heaven, it's Bhuvar Loka realm, just below heaven. So just a touch of Krishna's foot, he became freed from that curse. But after everything happened, he was ready to go back to the heavenly realm. He wasn't ready to go to the spiritual world. He had been purified by the touch of Krishna's foot, so that the curse was relieved. And now he had devotion for Krishna, but he wanted to go back to Vidyadhara Loka. But Prahlad, just by the touch of the hand of Lord Nrsingadeva on his head, all his fear was gone, all his, because he's a little boy, he didn't even start school hardly. He didn't know how to offer proper prayers, but by that touch of the Lord's hand upon his head, he was ready to offer beautiful, eloquent prayers. Just a little boy. But you know, I'm looking at you 5 again. The Kaliya serpent, Kaliya, the snake, Kaliya, had many, many hoods, and Krishna was dancing on his many, many hoods. And the poison of the lake, Kaliya lake, so you know. So how many times did Krishna put his foot on Kaliya's head? Many, 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 too many. So many times his hoods were smashed and misshapen because Krishna was heavy. He was dancing, but he's heavy. He's got the whole universe, and everything is within him, so his dancing was heavy. He smashed Kaliya's hoods. It took a long time before he got purified, but he got purified. But he was a difficult case. But Prahlad was already very elevated by association with Narada, so just the touch of Lord Nrsingadeva's hand upon his head, fearless and ready to offer very, very beautiful prayers. That's what we're reading, the prayers of Prahlad. He was completely freed of all material contaminations and desires, as if he had been thoroughly cleansed. Therefore, he at once became transcendentally situated, and all the symptoms of ecstasy became manifest in his body. His heart filled with love, his eyes with tears, and thus he was able to completely capture the lotus feet of the Lord within the core of his heart. Now, Krishna is already within the core of our heart, but we're not feeling that. We're feeling something else. Feeling happy or sad or hot or cold or hungry or full or tired or rested, or feeling things that are in relation to the body and the mind, but are feeling the presence of the Lord in the heart, our attention is somewhere else. But Prahlad became completely pure. So the Lord, who is always situated in the heart, became revealed to him. We heard this in an earlier chapter. Even as a small boy, he was always carrying Krishna within his heart, and he felt it. It's even a little boy. And how did that happen? It came because of his association with Narada. That's how the natural, the innate devotion that's within comes out. Association with a sadhu. And the method of his association was hearing. We're also hearing. The narrator is Shukadev Goswami. And the commentary is our founder Acharya and the previous Acharya. It's all very wonderful. And somehow come we're not feeling free from material desire. Same situation, different experience. Because we're pretty covered. So what do you do when you're pretty covered and you're not feeling what you know is possible, but you're too covered to experience it? What do? You go on hearing. And you go on doing service to that source that one hears from, with a feeling of gratitude that this opportunity of hearing is coming to you or to us. And largely, all of us, it's our founder Acharya. It's not an exaggeration. Here we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam with the purports of our previous acharyas summarized in a very nice way. Compliments of Srila Prabhupada's sacrifice for us. I'm thinking of a story, I don't remember who it was, but somebody shared, a lady shared this, a devotee. She grew up somewhere in South India, I think Kerala, but I'm not sure that my memory is right. And her grandmother, when she was a little girl, she would read the Bhagavatam like hours every day. She went to college in India. She did her master's degree in America. She got a job in America. She got married in America. She met devotees in America. She started practicing Krishna consciousness in America. No surprise. And after some time, she wanted to gift to her grandmother Srimad Bhagavatam with the Bhaktivedanta purports in their native language. So she went to visit, took the whole set of the entire Bhagavatams with her, and gifted it to her grandmother. And while she was visiting with Grandma was so absorbed in reading Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta purports in her native tongue, she had hardly had time to be with her granddaughter, which was unusual. And then she said to her granddaughter, I've been reading the Bhagavatam my whole life. Just and feeling purified because of it, because it's so wonderful, but I never understood it. And now, being familiar with the Bhagavatam and reading the Bhaktivedanta purports, now I'm beginning to understand it. And we may not have been, reading Bhagavatam for our whole life, and what to speak of from the stage of retirement from our occupational life and the rest. But the Bhaktivedanta purports make, it's wonderful. Even for children, to appreciate the wonders of Krishna and his wonderful pastimes, but to get a deeper insight into just how wonderful he is. We're very fortunate. Because it's been given to us, we may not have that kind of appreciation. I want to share something else, and then I'm going to read the next purport, verse and purport. We're in Palatine, or the area. Before being here in Palatine, I was in New Jersey, and just before that, I was in Connecticut. I met an elderly couple who are from Tamil Nadu. They're Tamil speaking, but they're both well educated. And they're neighbors of the devotees whose home I was staying for a couple of days. So they wanted to meet. They're not followers of ISKCON. I won't say what they're followers of, but they're not followers of ISKCON. But they have a son in med school, and another son that's in seventh grade, something like that. Well educated, very Brahminical in their demeanor and their features and everything. He was sharing with me, I was giving him a gift of Bhagavad-Gita, and he held it to his heart and said, recently my father passed away. My father was 80, and from the time he was 59, he retired, and every morning he would chant Vishnu Sahasranam after his morning bath, And then he would just read the Bhagavatam. He loved the Bhagavatam. I didn't ask what version. Just reading, like this lady from Kerala, reading the Bhagavatam. And when he from 59 to 80, that's what he did every day. Like all day. That's what he did. He was very devoted, and he loved the Bhagavatam. And he said when he passed, for the last 20 hours of his life, he just chanted Krishna's name. Krishna's and Ram's name. I didn't ask him which mantra. I didn't go there. He was just, it wasn't too, like, I thought he would be really emotional. It was more like respect for his father. And I was in awe. Here's this elderly man, and who knows what his association was, but just because of his samskaras, his piety, that was his life and soul, was the Bhagavatam. And to the very last breath, he said he took some spoonfuls of buttermilk every now and then, but otherwise he was just chanting Rama and Krishna's name. And that's how he left his body. So that's, I said, I don't know what's going to be happening for me when it's time to leave my body, but that's, you're so fortunate, and you're a very elevated father. And what I didn't say, but I was thinking, Prabhupada had that capacity, but when he went to Vrindavan, after his Vanaprastha stage of life, he didn't go to Vrindavan to chant Krishna's name so that he could go back to Godhead chanting Krishna's name in Vrindavan. What did he do? He went to Vrindavan with lots of obstacles and difficulties, etc. Without going into the details, it was very severe. Even in Vrindavan, even before he left Vrindavan to go to the West, to prepare literature to carry with him to America at 70 years of age, crossing in a boat that was very rough, had 2 heart attacks, to meet people that he never met before, under the order of his spiritual master. So comparing, I didn't say this, but I was thinking as he was speaking, how elevated, how rare is it that somebody leaves the world like his father left this world. And then now the son is carrying that legacy. And then his children, and how to pass on that legacy to his children. So it's not so distant from each of us. We may not have such elevated lineage in our family line, but here we are, and looking at our founder Acharya, what a great gift! What a great gift! I'm going to share something else. My thought is on some time ago. Three groups of people, some professors from Oxford University, a couple of GBC members, and some Bhakti Shastri teachers got together to come up with something that could do 2 things. One, help people who are not Ivory Tower, Oxford University people, and bring the message of Bhagavad-Gita down to everyday people. And how to do that effectively, nicely, easily, smoothly. The other was, since it's embedded in Bhagavad-Gita, what are some core teachings that can help those who are leaders in their communities or wherever to be guided by how to be qualified leaders. In your families, perhaps, or the community or temples or whatever. Those 2 things. So those 3 groups were after those 2 things. They spent some months together, however you had meetings. Maybe it was virtual meetings. And they came up with a very simple formula. The Gita values. And I've been teaching this. I liked it. There's 6. There's just terms, a little well-refined paragraph that explains each of the terms for everyday people to understand. It's a nice introduction to Bhagavad-Gita and its message. Fast forward, and now teaching it to the Chinese devotees. And it's really nice. Because just go a little bit. I'll come back to the Bhagavatam and Lord Sringadev in just a moment. I'm hitting the pause button on that for a purpose. For a purpose. It's connected to this. They want to play. I don't blame them. You guys okay? You like stories? Okay. Have you been to China? Maybe someday. His son is learning Chinese. His son is learning Chinese in school. His local school. Anyway. The leadership in China has carefully studied the history of religion in China. And, going way back as far as recorded time goes back. And during a certain period of time, there was an effort from Buddhists to connect, because they came from India, right? Buddhist teaching started in India. So it migrated from India into China, but it took root. And there were some brahmanas from India that didn't go to teach Buddhism. They went to teach the Vedas. And it got some traction for a while. But the brahmanas from India were too rigid. They didn't adapt to China so well. They had to make Chinese people Indian. So it faded. I mean, there's museums that have forms of Hindu gods and things like that, and writings and things like that, but it didn't last. Didn't take root. Why? Didn't have Chinese characteristics. But the Chinese people, the Buddhists working in China, managed to figure out how to accept certain things, like something that's within the Vedas, but worship of ancestors. It's a big thing in China. It has nothing to do with Buddhism. But they accepted it. And it helped graft Buddhism to China. You follow? So now, having done this study of the history of religion in China, the leaders are making this decision that when teaching Krishna consciousness in China, it has to have Chinese characteristics. So they now have this acronym, KCCC. Krishna consciousness with Chinese characteristics. So they revised the whole Bhakti Shastri curriculum so that it incorporates Chinese characteristics. They didn't change Bhagavad-Gita, but there's some terms and some thises and some that's and some things that the people of China can relate to it better. So it'll last over a long period of time and not splash and then fade. You with me? Okay, so they're trying to figure it out. Those who are doing book distribution, they distribute Prabhupada's books. Even in China, it's that's another story how they do that, but they do that. Kind of undercover, but they do that. And Now, to teach it to the people who receive the books, got to have Chinese characteristics. So we took, I came up with an idea, and every Monday morning, our time, is Monday evening, their time, we started Gita Values number 1, and it's Samadarshana. And it's explaining what the Vedic model is of Samadarshana. It's the soul. There's differences in coverings. And then in Chinese culture, they have a Samadarshana idea too. But it's not based upon the soul. It's based upon something. The Chinese devotees really want to know how to do this. So there are 320 people on this call. Normally it's 80, 90, 320. They're like really interested. And I found out later there were some professors from China that are interested in the connection between the link between the Vedas and traditional Chinese values and cosmology and teachings and things, how they're similar. The reason is there was once one culture. You know that, we know that, and they're finding it out. So there were some of those people on this. So the next one that's coming up is ahimsa. So after Samadarshana is ahimsa. It means nonviolence. Boy, that's a big thing in China. From Buddhism, at least. I mean, the government may not be so nonviolent, but Buddhism teaches nonviolence. And the people in China very much relate to Buddhism. So it's a really nice way to get a foot in the door to explain nonviolence, which they accept, and explain it in terms that they know. And then here's the Bhagavad-Gita idea of nonviolence. The normal idea, it's connected to what we just read from 7th Canto. Nonviolence, in its common sense, is you don't hurt people. Or you minimize that which causes pain for others. That's nonviolence. Prabhupada's explanation is that's very limited. When besides minimizing the suffering of others, what's the cause of suffering of others? The suffering of others is ignorance, forgetfulness of who you are. And so real nonviolence is reminding people of who they are, because you're minimizing their suffering. Got it? Do it again. The normal nonviolence is you don't hurt people. But when somebody's suffering and you know why they're suffering and you don't do anything, it's a kind of violence. And nonviolence is you know why they're suffering and you go out of your way to help them become free from suffering. That's nonviolence. It's proactive nonviolence. Not just you don't slap them around. You go out of your way to help relieve them from suffering. That's nonviolence. That's real nonviolence. It's connected to the Samadarshana idea, the soul idea. So Lord Nrsingadev, back to 7th Canto, Lord Nrsingadev has appeared and he's just, wiped out Hiranyakashipu. And not only Hiranyakashipu, but all of his followers, because they wanted to get revenge and they were finished too. So that looks like violence. But he was the violent one. That's why he came. So Lord Prahlad is going to speak words that are going to relieve us of ignorance. That's nonviolence. That's the higher sense, the Bhagavad-Gita value of ahimsa, and the Bhagavatam value of ahimsa is relieving people of the cause of their suffering. Here's a classic little example. Supposing somebody, I'm not a doctor, supposing somebody's a doctor and they're going home from the hospital and they're walking along the sidewalk and they got the little black medicine bag with them and they see somebody writhing on the sidewalk and bleeding. Well, I'm off duty. I'm just going to walk right by. They didn't necessarily cause that, whatever it is that has them lying on the sidewalk and bleeding. But if they know what to do to relieve them of that condition, they do nothing. It's a kind of violence. If we know, similarly, if we know what the cause of suffering is, we don't do anything. So back to this, what Prabhupada did is he was propelled, motivated, sacrificing everything to relieve people of ignorance. He wanted people to be happy. And who were the people he wanted to be happy? The world. Not just people he knew, people he didn't know, like us. He wanted us to be happy. He made sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice, and his life was a life of sacrifice. He didn't go to Vrindavan just to chant, leave his body because he was elderly in Vrindavan. That's where it ended up, by Krishna's mercy. But his mission was relieving people of suffering. His life was a life of nonviolence. The role model of the example of nonviolence. And I'm thinking of it specifically because this coming Monday, that's my topic. Ahimsa. Just sharing with you. The structure is, I'm going to introduce the concept. I already did it, but I'll just say it again quickly. Here's what we're doing for the next 6 classes. We're going to go through the 6 Gita values. And that's like, intro. Then there's a Chinese devotee with a female voice, because she's a woman. She lives in America, and she's going to she has a PowerPoint, so it's going to be a split screen on a Zoom call. And here's her PowerPoint, and she's going to explain the PowerPoint on Ahimsa. Here's what it means. Here's where it is in Chinese culture. Here's the picture, the drawing of this person, that person, somebody that everybody knows. Ahimsa's in Chinese culture. That's part 2. Part 3 is there's a very learned devotee, Yasoda Kumar is his name, and he's going to spend 15 minutes going through this and that, the other thing and the other thing. No translation, just in Chinese, explaining Ahimsa's in Chinese culture. And then comes part 4. I'm going to say this is where Ahimsa is in Bhagavad-Gita. And then part 5 is questions and answers. And then I'm going to give them some homework, so they can discuss amongst themselves, because you can't have a breakout session with 320 people. I don't know how to do it. So they'll have some homework. They'll take a partner and discuss these things about applying nonviolence in your life. And how does it differ from the conventional sense of nonviolence? So it'll be in the talk, but then they'll have to discuss it themselves. It's just a little sharing of how to take the message of Krishna consciousness and make it relevant and relatable to different audiences, besides, look around the room, non-resident Indians. Or the children of non-resident Indians who from childhood hear these wonderful Krishna stories. And you get to know them. But there's lots of other people that you meet in school. They don't know these stories. And so how are you going to relate to the people that don't know these stories, but you have it inside? And then as you go on in your education and grow up and do stuff, you're going to be mixing with all kinds of people and different levels of your education and your life. And how do you help them understand ABC about Vedic wisdom? I mean, it may not be a big challenge for you right now. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But it's important. And then all of us who are a little bit older than you four over here, we have similar opportunities and challenges. So the story of, back to Bhagavatam, the story of Prahlad is a wonderful story that describes principles of awakening higher consciousness, because he says, this is chapter 9. He says in chapter 10, in continuation of his prayers, you sent me from the spiritual world to this world to teach by example the ways of pure devotion. And that's what he's doing. And the ways of pure devotion take shape like this at this time, and like that at that time, and like something else at another time, but the principles don't change. So we need to connect with the principles and find ways and means, as Prabhupada did, to make it relatable to the audiences where he spoke. And he was very practical. Really practical. I'll share one. This is the last Sunday feast class I gave. No, the one before that was in Boston. It was a Wednesday class. I spoke about Prabhupada's composing what's the title of the book? Light of the Bhagavad. Light of the Bhagavad has a nice history. Pardon me while I'm into trying to help people appreciate it's not so difficult, but you have to be a little creative to make the message of what we're immersing ourselves in relatable to people that aren't from India. I mean, it's nice, relatable to people from India. It's also nice when it's people it's relatable. So Prabhupada was living in Vrindavan after he left his household life at the age of 59, this and that, the other circumstance. He traveled here and traveled there and traveled many places. He ended up in Vrindavan. He had a mission that was an instruction from his spiritual master, Mission Impossible. Take this message to the English-speaking parts of the world. It's good for them and good for you. Same time. How to do that? He had no money, he was old, this and that. How to do it? So but the mission was in his heart. So he decided, I should at least take the teachings of the Bhagavatam with me before I go. So he was preparing manuscripts to be published explaining Srimad Bhagavatam. While he was doing this, and back to Godhead magazine fortnightly kind of thing, he met a man in Delhi that gave him an invitation that he had received for something about human spirit, Festival of the Human Spirit or something like that was being arranged by somebody in Tokyo, honoring the human spirit, something like that. And so Prabhupada wrote to the man, said, I'd like to come. And the man wrote back saying, sure, here's a letter, a sponsorship letter for you to get your visa. You come and you can, we'll take care of your accommodation, your meals and everything, your requirements, but you're going to have to get your own transportation here. Prabhupada had no money. So he went here and there and there and there and everywhere to get sponsorship from people that, I'm an emissary of India's culture to the West, and no airfare. But meanwhile, he was writing, this is the creative part. People in the Orient, he reasoned, they like to understand things through nature. And it's true. It's true. I mean, one of the Sama Darshana Chinese culture persons had this whole thing to say about there's sky, and there's the ocean, and there's the land, and there's people that move about the land, and there's a relationship between the man that move and the animals that move about the earth, and there's the earth below and sky above, and the understanding of the value of life just in terms of nature. It's just part of the culture, without going into it too much. So Prabhupada reasoned, if I can present the Bhagavatam through descriptions of nature and lessons about life through the descriptions of nature, that will be relatable to that audience in Tokyo. So he started taking chapter 20 of Canto 10. That's all about the autumn season and the spring season. Summer and autumn. Summer and autumn. Summer, 2 seasons. And it's just like nature. Descriptions of what's going on in nature during those 2 seasons. And he wrote a book giving lessons about life. It never got published because he didn't have money. But that was the tool that he was planning to present to the people in Tokyo. This is the message of Srimad Bhagavatam. In language, and he wanted artistically embellished. He asked the organizer, can you get I can be the art director, you find an artist, and I can direct the artist how to make paintings to match my presentation. He had the idea to make a book out of it. It didn't get published until after Prabhupada's departure. Someone found the manuscript, knew what Prabhupada's plan was, and had it published. It was Tamal Krishna Maharaj who published it in Hong Kong with a Chinese artist. But the point is, Prabhupada wanted to make the message relatable. Didn't change the message, but find a way to make the message relatable to people that's your audience. And then the world is your audience. That's the spirit of our founder Acharya. That's the ahimsa spirit of our founder Acharya. He wanted people to be happy, and he wanted to make it relatable to the people he was expressing himself to. So he made adjustments in the detail without changing the principle. Great acharyas can do that, but we're not great acharyas, but we can do that. And it's to do that means to follow our founder acharya, and with compassion, with the desire that people should be happy, and that is their suffering should be diminished because of the covering of ignorance. So then how do you get knowledge to people that don't talk your language, culturally speaking? You find out what their culture is and make it relatable. Okay, I'm going to read one more verse in purport. When the Shringadev saw the small boy Prahlad prostrated at the soles of his lotus feet, he became most ecstatic in affection toward his devotee. We read, raising Prahlad, the Lord placed his lotus hand upon the boy's head, because his hand is always ready to create fearlessness in all his devotees. Prabhupada writes, the devotee's hope of becoming fearless is to have the holy name of Lord Nrsingadev, Yato Yato Yamita To Nrsinga, wherever we go, we must always think of Lord Nrsingadev. Thus, there will be no fear for the devotee of the Lord. I'm going to tell 2 New York City stories. One was with a young brahmachari who was kind of like eccentric, and another was a lady. Two different situations. We did lots of public Harinam, and one time we were going back, so there was a big function in Central Park, so we went with Harinam and books. And the system at that time, we had these pouches with a drawstring on it, hanging from our neck. When people would give donations, we just put it in the pouch. At the end of the event, we give the pouch to the Sankirtan party leader. So one devotee, Satrajit, we were going on the subway line. He got on the wrong subway. We had to switch trains to go downtown, and he got on the wrong subway platform. And a train went rumbling through. We couldn't see him, couldn't hear him. And then the train stopped and pulled out. And there he was, crying. We found out what happened. Because he was separated from the group, some man that wanted the money pouch that he was wearing mugged him. And so what did he do? At the top of his lungs, he screamed the Shringadev's name. And they ran. Maybe they thought he was mad, or I don't know what. But they left him alone. Another time, Central Park, same thing, big festival. Hiding in a bush was a rapist. He grabbed a girl, tried to pull her to do his dirty business. She screamed Shringadev's name at the top of her lungs. He left her alone. Now, they weren't exactly fearless, but they were certainly protected. And when you're protected, you can become fearless. If you're not protected, anything could happen. That's where our discussion started. There's what is certain these days. You make your plan, and you have to allow the contingency. Let's see what happens. Like we're making a plan just today, making a plan to go to Vrindavan for a yatra at Kartik time. So somebody asked, is it on? We're making a plan. But, let's see what happens with Mr. COVID. The pendulum may swing over that way. And then it's off. So we're making a plan, but it's not certain. And it seems to be going in this direction, but it's not certain. Sangeeta Kapoor went to India because her mother was ill. She couldn't come back because she got COVID. It wasn't like terrible symptoms, but she had to get one of those super duper tests, and for so many days she's good, and then she can come back. It's not over, but who knows? It could. Look what's going on in China. They got lockdown in China, and they're strict. Boy, are they strict about everything, including. So anyway, who knows? It's uncertainty. And when you're uncertain, you better have protection. And not only to have a vaccine and wear a mask and stuff, but be careful. And not just Mr. COVID. Just be careful. Be careful. So when you're protected, it doesn't mean you're cavalier about how you make your decisions and do things. You stay within boundaries that are reasonable, but your place of shelter is clear. Place of shelter is clear. Krishna will protect you. Ultimately, Krishna will protect you by taking you to him. And that's what's going on here, these prayers of Prahlad. Here's the purport from that verse. The necessities of the material world are four. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending, gives the Sanskrit. In this material world, everyone is in fearful consciousness. Sada, samudvigna dhyam. And the only means to make everyone fearless is Krishna consciousness. When Lord Nrsingadev appeared, all the devotees became fearless. The devotees' hopes of becoming fearless is to chant the holy name of Nrsinga. There we go, I read that. Wherever we go, we must always think of the Lord Nrsingadev. Thus there will be no fear for the devotee of the Lord. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow, text 6. Anything you like to share, comments or questions, or Krishna stories you'd like to hear, Shringa stories you'd like to hear?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for the class. I was just contemplating on about the violence and the non-violence part,
Okay.
ahimsa. One of the ways violence can manifest is not physical violence, but violent communication, right? Or somebody hurting through words.
Yes.
And that can be more hurtful than actually physical, because
More lasting, at least.
more lasting also, yeah, in some cases, and in many cases, yeah. Any like tips on how to handle a situation where, you know, either you're, I guess, in both ways, right? I mean, how not to hurt.
The giving and the receiving end.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Mark.
Well, to err is human, and we're human. So allowing for the fact that we're going to err and others are going to err or make a mistake. When you make a mistake, what would you like from others? And when you understand what you would like from others, that's what you should do unto others when they make a mistake. Especially when you're acknowledging the mistake, and what would you like others to do? You'd like them to accept your apology and forgive. And forgive and forget. Move on. Like, not stay with it. So do that. If you're on the receiving end, that's one of the things to do. You tolerate, you forgive, you think of what are some of the ways that I can be of help to a person who has spoken something hurtful to me or to another. You may not have an answer to that question, but if you ask the question, you're in a reflective space rather than a reactive space. You're in a mode of goodness position rather than a passion-ignorant position. And if that light is on, then you're open to some signal from Krishna that says, here's something you can do that will be helpful rather than reactive to the other person. And learn the lesson that as I feel these feelings, I'm sure I may say some things unintentionally that may hurt somebody else in part because of perception, not my intention. So let me be careful with my speech. So then comes the other side. Now you may know, Krishnarchana has been teaching a seminar on Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. It's now converted into empathic communication, Krishnaized nonviolent communication. So it's effective, from what I've understood. People that have read that little book and have applied the teachings and the interactive sessions, it's helpful. It's not a silver bullet, but it's helpful to be conscious of the principle and then the application of the principle. I mean, to say everything that and the end response to your question would be a seminar. But there's just some points. As far as possible, in ways that are manageable for you or for any one of us, you frame your life in the quality of goodness, and that quality of goodness will spill over or prevail in areas of how you act and how you speak in relation to others. In other words, the same yasyasti bhaktir bhagavat yakinchana, the qualities, we just read it with Prahlad, the qualities of Prahlad were very elevated because of his pure devotion. And if you and any one of us move along that path of bhakti, those good qualities will become your decoration. You'll be more socially sensitive. Naturally so. Naturally so. Let's say, a cultured person is socially sensitive. An uncultured person isn't. An uncultured person is like an animal or a drunk person or something. They don't know what they're doing and how it's impacting other people. Also, they're unaware. They're just socially insensitive. The other way, it's a Krishna conscious person is a cultured person, and they're socially sensitive. It's not calculating, it's just sensitivity. When I speak, how's it going to impact others? When I act, how's it going to impact others? And you read the Bhagavatam, and it elevates consciousness and gives that social sensitivity right within the Bhagavatam, when you read it carefully. I'm thinking of a particular example. The very first lesson, philosophical lesson in the Bhagavatam, is in relation to Draupadi wanting Arjuna to spare Ashwatthama's life. He took a vow. When you're performing the funeral for your 5 sons, you can stand on his head, because I'm going to chop his head off, and you're pouring oblations into the fire. You can stand on his head. He caught him. He's got his sword raised. His other hand is on Ashwatthama's hair, ready to chop his head off. And Draupadi says, don't do it. Why? I took a vow. I'm a Kshatriya. I got to keep my vow. Well, I release you from the vow. You don't have to do it. Please don't do it. Anyway, back and forth. Why? Because she didn't want Kripi to suffer. Because she, at least she has her 5 husbands, but Kripi lost her husband. Now to lose her son also, then she has nothing. That shouldn't happen. Her son is really bad. He just killed her 5 sons. But she shouldn't suffer like this. So, when you act, what's going to be the consequence? It was the right action. The penalty for murder is death. It's virtuous, it's right, it's good for him. He should be killed because otherwise he'll suffer in this life and the next. It's the right dharmic action. Plus the vow. but it spares life. So it's when you do something or say something, who might be adversely influenced by that? And a sensitive person will consider, how are others going to be affected by my words and actions? So elevation of Krishna consciousness means those kinds of considerations will become your considerations. Naturally so. And by carefully studying the Bhagavatam, it will become part of your life, as it is for elevated personalities. You usually have a question. You got a question to this evening? You usually have a question. Nothing?
I had a question before, but
You forgot.
Yeah, I forgot.
Maybe we'll think about it. It'll come back. You have something tomorrow.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So when the reference is taking shelter of the Supreme Lord. So we know at the back of our mind that Supreme Lord is there. He will take care of the things. He will protect us. But at the same time, there is manifestation of these negative feelings as well through body or through expressions like fear, anxiety, or some kind of...
So many.
Yeah. But at the same time, we have that understanding and perhaps faith also. So how do these both things go together, and why it is like this contradiction?
Let me be clear what your question is. Your question is not, how do I navigate that territory? Your question is, why?
And also, I would like to know, Maharaj, how do I navigate that territory also?
Oh. Well, the why is simple. It's attachment to the temporary.
Oh.
Ignorance is the root of all suffering. Yes?
Yeah.
If it weren't for ignorance, you wouldn't have a material body. But we have ignorance, we have a material body. And with material body, gross and subtle, then there's suffering. So, you can't just remove ignorance by snapping your fingers and say, okay, ignorance, go away. The body doesn't go away, the mind doesn't go away, ignorance doesn't go away. But it can be cultivated. And that which supports knowledge is bhakti. So we cultivate bhakti, that from bhakti comes knowledge and detachment. And then you can experience the world around you and see it for what it is without being driven by it, controlled by it, the happiness and distress in terms of it. You can see what's going on and then make your choices according to what's appropriate for the circumstance to enhance your devotion. And you live your life that way, including when life throws rocks at you and it hurts. And now what am I going to do? That's in response to my relationship with Krishna. And if you're thinking like that, you're in a higher consciousness place immediately. And as it becomes cultivated stronger, 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 that's where you are always. And you can still see what's going on, but you respond in a different way than if you're not in that consciousness.
So this manifestation of negative emotion, it feels like it's involuntary.
That's conditioning. Negative emotion is due to ignorance.
Because we see that ultimately Krishna protects, ultimately he brings us to the destination. Every time we have seen that.
Yes. It's not like you'll never stub your toe. Or you'll never get disease, or you'll never die. You become a devotee and Krishna will protect you. You're going to live forever in that body that doesn't have any pain. That's not... But he'll take you to the destination. He'll protect you from identifying with that. So, the initial part is, the initial instruction of Bhagavad-Gita is you tolerate. There's duality. It's out there. And the mind the senses are perceiving it. It goes to the mind, and then comes some feeling, a negative feeling. Oh, look at this. Or somebody insulted me. Or whatever is, the perception and the experience of that perception in the mind. But without identifying with the mind, or a purified mind goes to Krishna. One whose mind goes to Krishna doesn't feel those feelings because their mind is with Krishna. Now, they feel transcendental feelings.
Thank you.
The cultivation of Krishna consciousness. That's the solution. The lack of it is the cause, and the awakening of it is the solution. Then there's, there are details connected to that solution, but that's how you navigate. There we go. Use the microphone. Just hold it near your mouth. You know how to do that.
I have 2 questions.
3 questions? 2, okay.
I think you mentioned both in the class, but I just can't remember them. Okay. So, when you were saying that you can preach the Buddhists when you relate to like non-violence and everything, is there another way except non-violence to preach, or is it are there other relations of with the Vedic literatures and Chinese like their history?
Where's your mother? Could you follow what he just asked? Could you follow what he asked? Give it to Shatarupa. Go ahead, say it.
So you mentioned that with ahimsa, there was some commonality with Chinese characteristics. So are there other parts which would also be relatable to them?
Sure. Yes. There are other parts, and there's differences. And the main difference is there isn't acknowledgement of a soul. Common in China, common in Buddhism, and common in China, is there's not acceptance of the soul, which is weird in one sense because they're worshiping ancestors. So what is it they're worshiping? You follow? Why worship an ancestor if they're not soul? What are they doing? But there's a national holiday. I learned this from my visit to China. It's called Tomb Sweeping Festival. Everybody's off of work on Tomb Sweeping Day. It's the culture encouraged by the government. It's not having anything to do with the soul because they don't want to promote religion, but they would promote their ancestors. And the ants, they go and sweep the tomb of their ancestors and offer some kind of, I don't know what they do, some rituals for their ancestors without a conception of the soul, which is very strange. I find it strange. But it's culture. It's like, okay. So there's, in Vedic culture, there's offering of shraddha to the ancestors in case the ancestors are in some difficult position. And there's rules. It's the eldest son and this and that and the other thing. And this, so it's recommended. So there's similarities and there's differences. The main difference is the soul. And then the application of the soul with nonviolence has to do with the soul. Liberating the soul from its misfortune is real nonviolence. And doing anything other than liberating the soul from its misfortune is violence. You can pat somebody on the head without liberating the soul from its in bondage. It is violence. It's just a lighter kind of violence, but it's perpetuating their suffering unnecessarily. Got it? Second question.
And my second question
Mom.
was, and like you were saying at school and stuff,
Yeah.
how do you relate to like the other kids who don't know all the stories? Like, how do you relate to them?
How do you relate to kids in school that don't know anything about all the stuff that you learn at home? Smile. And it's serious. If you're happy, like, for the most part, you can be grumpy sometimes, but if you're happy most of the time, if you're like a happy person, people want to know, hey, what's with you? You're happy all the time. And when they ask you, then you can tell them. Like it probably happens with lunch. They say, what you got there? Then you can tell them. You don't like go and hit them with a stick and saying, why are you eating that stuff? You have them ask you why you bring your lunch and what are you eating? And then you can tell them, gently, respectfully, little by little by little. And, the main thing is be happy. Be a person, be a good person inside and outside, and a happy person. And that's attractive because everybody wants to be happy. And then they'll start asking you all kinds of things. Like why this and why that, and what's those beads you have around your neck, and they'll ask you those kind of things. And then you just, little by little. But if you're a friendly and happy person, then they'll be attracted to that, and then you can say more and say more without them feeling you got a stick in your hand, you're trying to whack them with that stick. By you catch people with honey more than with vinegar. You got it? Okay.
Maharaj, one question. I'm in pain. Somebody comes to me, they offer help. I don't need their help. Or the help they are offering, I don't find it helpful. What do I do?
You smile. I mean, sometimes you accept simply because it's courtesy. And a lot of it depends upon the person and their spirit. And, the exchange is not the meaningfulness of this something that you need and, oh, thank you for this, I really needed this. But it's the mood of wanting to offer something. It's a loving exchange. So how do you deal with it? Do you say thank you? You accept it. It depends, but you accept it. I mean, sometimes people that don't know better, they give chocolates. Now, what am I going to do with chocolates? Or, something. So it depends on the person, how you can respond. You find somebody that isn't a Hare Krishna devotee, you give them the chocolate. But you accept the gift because you accept there's something that they're offering. Here's another one. It's a very memorable event. I was visiting a place, it was Singapore, and, international flights generally come in at like some ungodly hour in the earlier morning. You stand, anyway. So I from the airport and going through all the immigration and that stuff and bags and stuff. So I got to the destination at about 2:00 in the morning. And I was really tired. I wanted to take a shower. I'm in the, coming out of the shower, putting on my dhoti. A little girl didn't even knock on the door. She was so enthusiastic. She wanted to give me some beads. But they they were beads that she strung on a piece of string, and there was different colors and different sizes, and it was like she just couldn't wait till I got my dhoti on to give me the string of beads that I had no need for. But she was so affectionate that was what was accepted. Not that it's something that I needed. And, it was an expression of loving. She obviously, 2 and 2 equals 4. She had been preparing this for some time just to make this little offering that was really meaningful to her and useless for me. But it's the gesture that was accepted. It was a very, very heart-touching gesture. I still remember it so many years ago. So a lot depends on the nature of the person and the purpose behind the giving of the gift and things like that. Or extending some service. Now, sometimes I decline because it's not appropriate to accept something. How you respond to such things, a lot depends upon the person and the relationship with the person. It's easy to say no. It's another thing to say no graciously. Or to say yes graciously, even though it's not so meaningful. The particular item is not something you need. Cultured persons, it's something that I've understood about myself is I lack grace. It has everything to do with like not being a very cultured person. But graceful persons know how to do these things. And like Prabhupada. Staying in the home of Sally Agarwal, she told later, I thought I would be really uncomfortable, but I never felt uncomfortable. He was always so gracious. And whatever it was okay. And then whatever the conversation was, he'd bring it to Krishna. It was so nice. He never made us feel uncomfortable. So cultured people can do those things. So work on your Krishna consciousness. And then that nice quality can be there and you know what to say and how to say it. Do we have something online? No? Yeah, ladies? Anything? Yes?
Like when you were mentioning like how Krishna consciousness for Chinese culture to make it, I was thinking about the light of Bhagavata that Prabhupada had.
Yes.
So I think it was last year sometime when you were visiting, you were mentioning you're working on something on Ramayana for Chinese.
I did it.
You did it.
I continued. You want to hear the story?
Yeah.
Okay. 3 things. Every year in China, they have a national holiday that lasts for 7 days. Any of you that know Chinese people in the workplace, they're workaholics. Work. They're very skilled and very hard workers. But for 7 days, they don't go to work. So it's a really great time to have a seminar. It's every year for years. So that last one was a virtual one, and it was personalities from Ramayana. And from that, there's a lot of interest. And from that, I learned something. After that, then one of the persons who attended miraculously got the Chinese government to approve the printing of Ramayana in Chinese. Now, the BBT in China has been trying for like 2.5 years, and they don't get a yes or a no. They don't get any word. That means no. And a lady took another version instead of Krishna Dharma's, it was Bhakti Vikash Maharaj's, and she got permission. And then after getting permission, she got an ISBN. So now the book can be, it was the literal translation was made, and then the publisher said, you're going to have to put Chinese characteristics into this. So she had to go through everything and make Chinese characteristics. So I don't know exactly what that means, but and he's really happy with her work. And he said, don't get obsessive about it. You got to stop at some point and let's go. So then some time passed, and I made another suggestion. While this is in the works, I found out that in China, there are 4 books that everyone reads in school. One of them is called Journey West, and it was written about 1,000 years after the event happened. The event was a Chinese monk during the Tang Dynasty in the eastern part of China really, really, really wanted to know Buddha's teaching because there are too many versions around, even at that time. So he decided to go overland all the way by foot through deserts and hostile territory and, big adventure. And he kept records of his travel to the birthplace of Buddha. He learned Sanskrit, studied under a 100-year-old personality. I mean, the Chinese government they have a video on the guy's life. And then he all the way back. This and that, the other, high adventure. And he's a celebrity that he wrote very careful records, 1,000 years later, it was rewritten by a contemporary author who added some things. And one of the things he added was Hanuman. The translation of his Chinese name is the Monkey King, but he didn't call him Hanuman. He called him some Chinese name. It means the Monkey King. And, he was there with this traveler. He made sure he made it and protected him and this and that and the other thing. It just took embellishments from Ramayana. So everybody in China knows the Sun King, Monkey King. And I could put 2 and 2 together. I asked Yogeshwara Prabhu, who wrote a children's book, Hanuman, would you be willing to have this published in China? He said, I'll do everything I can to help make it happen. So he's given his permission, and the publisher is trying to get an ISBN for Hanuman, because they'll love it. And it's kind of like a doorway to get into Ramayana, because they only know the Monkey King. It goes with Shenzhen, who made this travel across the country. And now here's our host, Hare Krishna. The last time I visited in Naperville, the person one of the hosts for the home program in Naperville was a lady who's helping with the fundraising for the new temple in Naperville. And before I got there, I got a message from Premananda saying she wants to get you a gift. And I said, I'm a sannyasi. I don't need gifts. But she wants to give you a gift. She wants to give you a gift. And I said, well, don't have her get a jacket. She said, oh, that's what she wanted to get you. I said, I'm in Detroit. In the closet is a jacket in a box, and it's going to stay in the box in the closet when I leave, because I don't need a jacket. I got a jacket. No, thank you. I don't need another jacket. But if she really wants to do something, here's something she can do. We're trying to, get this Hanuman book published. So if she wants, she can help with the Hanuman book. You bring Hanuman into China. Ask her if she wants to help bring Hanuman into China. So it turns out she's a Hanuman Bhakta. and her brother's a Hanuman Bhakta, and her friend's a Hanuman Bhakta, and they just want to know how much. I said, "Whoa, wait a minute." I said, "I don't know. It's gonna the publisher's gonna have to get a copy and this and that and the other thing." So the publisher said, because of the relationship between China and the U.S. right now, since the author is from the U.S., let's wait and see if we get the ISBN before we get a price on the book. I said, okay. But, if it depends. So this is your question. What if somebody's offering you a jacket and you got a jacket? You don't need a jacket. Or, you don't need. So depends on the circumstance, but you can be creative and say, here's something that would be useful. Fortunately, she asked instead of just getting a jacket number 2 or 3 or. But she's really happy bringing Hanuman into China. I'm like, if you're Hanuman Bhakta, what's better than that? Right? My whole life I've been a Hanuman Bhakta. Our whole family, extended family. Anyway. So that's something that's going on.
One question. These days, like how most of the
I don't know if it's going to happen, but I have a reasonable confidence it's going to happen, because all of this has just been going on with doors that weren't even there, and all of a sudden the door opens, and then what's behind the door is this another door, and things just keep happening. It's just providential.
Right.
So it's it's an ordeal, but I have some, not just hope, but reasonable amount of confidence. Hanuman's going to make it
Haribol.
into China.
Jai. Is there something like similar to for the American audience too? Because I was just wondering, relating that probably it's not needed because it's a free country. Is that something?
There's different audiences within America, but something that strikes a chord, we just did. Being penned up with pandemic, people are experiencing exceptional amount of negative emotion by for many reasons, not just the pandemic. So we just had this little event that was the art of meditation, overcoming negative emotion, was the theme, but it was all kinds of other things, and it was a very nice experience. We're going to do it again. There are 100 people that came. You know this one, right? You heard. So we're going to do another one. And it was almost all Western people going to Gitanagri, and it was nice. They came from all over the place. And now it's going to expand, the areas from which people will come. I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody from upstate New York, around the Newburgh area, and somebody from Syracuse and New York, and from different places coming, bringing young people, have a nice experience, and then when they go back, they'll be joyful. It's new people that know nothing about nothing, and go back with the Bhagavad-Gita and some beads and some nice memories, and want to come again and bring their friends. That's just one. There's so many. One of those persons that went sent a photograph. He's from New York, and the photograph was in Tompkins Square Park, and there was like 25 young people from the Bhakti Center doing kirtan at Tompkins Square Park. And I recognized some of the faces. Gauravani was there, and this one, that one, the other. So, and he is in the midst of this thing. That's young people having Harinam in Tompkins Square Park together, like the good old days. Really nice. Really nice. Okay, Anything else? Anybody? Okay, we're done. You have something? No. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.